This is hi. This is my first trip to Germany, and I was just explaining that my grandfather actually immigrated from Germany, so it's very interesting to finally be here, where half my family originated from. But it's been a beautiful experience so far.
Also sie ist das erste Mal in Deutschland, aber es ist für sie sehr spannend, weil ihr Großvater nach Amerika emigriert ist und sie jetzt hier ihre Familienwurzeln zum ersten Mal erleben kann.
Not even compare to this on the scale. It's a beautiful setup, so I'm having an amazing time so far.
Also sie genießt es sehr, hier zu sein. Sie haben was Ähnliches in New York, eine große Buchmesse, die aber von der Größe der Frankfurter Buchmesse nicht vergleichbar ist, und sie genießt es sehr, hier zu sein. Das ist ein ganz besonderes Event, weil 3 ihrer Verlage Ideen herkommen.
Yes, I have an office in my house. It's basically like a library, so I work at a little couch that I have in there, and behind me is a wall of all my author copies that the publisher sends me, and then I have all my books in there. And I also have like a screened-in porch outside that when the weather's nice, I'll go out there and write. But usually I start writing around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And because, as you guys know, I have so many books, I have a lot of deadlines. So I write from about 11 o'clock in the morning to about 9 o'clock at night, nearly every day, 7 days a week, when I'm on deadline. So. When I have a writing block, when I get to a point in a story that I just cannot get any more words out, usually that's an indication that I need a break, or maybe there's something wrong with the story. And just sometimes you just burn out a little bit when you're working. So what I typically do is I'll jump ahead and write a scene that I'm excited about. Sometimes that's jumping ahead and writing the end of the book. Or writing a kissing scene, or something like that, and that usually gets me over the writing block.
Okay, also sie hat das schon.
When I first started writing, we all have hopes and expectations that our books will be published around the world, but the reality is it's very hard for books that are published in America to make it over to deciding packages to get in the mail. Is the foreign copies that the publishers send me, because I love looking at them. And I'm not saying this because I'm sitting here in Germany, but my favorite actual foreign editions across the board are my German editions, mainly because the covers are always so beautiful, and I almost always prefer the German covers over the United States covers. So the publishers here do an amazing job with the covers of the books.
Also sie hat gesagt, sie freut sich wahnsinnig darüber und freut sich immer, wenn ein Päckchen aus einem anderen Land kommt mit einem.
So I am writing all day long. I am also online all day long. I am constantly on social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram. I do have a Snapchat account. I just don't use it often. I just pretty much use it to make really terrible videos of myself and send them to people. But I periodically check in, which I think is why I'm able to write so much during the day, is because I do take breaks. I also have a tendency to play Super Mario Brothers 3 online in between working. I finally beat the game. I'm so proud of myself. It's the small things in life, but I also have help when it comes to answering emails. When you're online, you are talking to me. That's 100% always me. Sometimes if I'm on deadline, I have an assistant that will pop in and answer some of the emails that really don't require a direct response from me. But if it's someone, talking about the book, it's me. But my assistant's actually here, Stephanie. I'm really crushed under deadline.
Also, ihr ist es selber sehr wichtig, dass...
So, I'm going to tell you a very quick, interesting story about how the Lux series came about. I had just turned in another book to my editor, and she jokingly made a statement. She said, "Since you can write so fast, have you ever thought about writing about aliens in high school?" And I laughed, said, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." And I hung hung up the phone. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, there wasn't a lot of stuff like that at that time. The only thing that was similar was I Am Number 4, which really didn't take place in high school. But, so I called my editor back and I said, what do you mean aliens in high school? And she was like, I just want to see aliens in high school. And I was like, and she was like, I want it to be a romance. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. So the first thing I did is I actually came up with Damon's character first. And then I came up with Katie's character. I wrote Obsidian in 7 days. Wow. I ended up having to rewrite 50% of the book. And Dawson, Damon's brother, was originally in the original version of Obsidian. And my editor had called me after I turned the book in, and she said, I have a really small editorial request for you. And by the way, if you haven't read Obsidian, this is going to be a spoiler for you. So, she said, I think Dawson should be dead. And I was like, wait a minute, that is not a little request. Like, I have to take him out of every scene. It changes the entire motivation of the characters. Interestingly, it made the book stronger and it made Damon's motivations better. But Obsidian was the book that almost never happened. I almost didn't write it, so I'm glad I did. So I think it's super cool that Damon was voted #1 book boyfriend. I think Damon would be very proud of that, and he probably wouldn't be surprised. When I created Damon, let's be real, Damon is a jerk in Obsidian. When I wrote him, I really did not expect people immediately to like him. I mean, because you're not really supposed to. He's not a nice guy in the beginning. And one of the reasons why I think Damon is voted best book boyfriend is because once you start to peel back the layers of his character, you start to understand his motivation, and you understand that he will do anything to protect his family. And there's something very admirable about that. But also, as you guys know in Onyx, Kat made him work for that. And I really wanted Kat to, not basically be like, oh, you're hot, I like you. No, he was a jerk to her, and he really had to work at earning her trust and her love, because I don't want the message ever to be sent that just because a guy or a girl is good looking, they can behave any way they want. No, they need to earn your respect and love, and that's what Damon spends the vast majority of Onyx doing. So when I decided to write Obsidian, Onyx, and Opal from Damon's point of view, the main reason why I only wrote those 3 books is because Origin and Opposition is in dual POV, so you start to see. But I really wanted readers to understand what Damon was going through in the first book, because I feel like if you read Oblivion, you can sense his own confusion about how he feels about Kat, a human that he usually is very dismissive of. And I think, it's interesting to see him falling in love without realizing that's what he's doing. I am so excited to talk about Retribution. I cannot wait for you guys to read it. It is taking everything for me not to sit up here and spoil the entire book for you. But Retribution takes place 4 years after the end of Opposition. So Luke, who you met in Opal, is the first time you met him. He was about 14 years old. He is now 18, almost 19. Actually, I think he is 19 at this point. He is still Luke, which is a bit of a handful and then some, but he's all grown up now, and he is a bigger handful to deal with. And you will see familiar faces from the original Lux series. I can tell you that Damon is in the first 100 pages. It's one of my favorite scenes I've ever wrote. It's so awkwardly funny to me what is happening, and Damon is just not getting the cue to leave, but he's just hanging in there. There is a huge, huge plot twist that is in that book that I cannot wait for you guys to start connecting the dots and realize who you're actually reading about. And I think everyone's going to be really excited about that. And in the it's basically going to be called the Origin series. The world just expands so much in that series. Titan series is a spin-off of the Covenant series where Seth is originally introduced. And I think the really big difference between the Titan series and the Dark Elements, besides one is dealing with Greek mythology and the other one is dealing with gargoyles and demons and all kinds of crazy stuff, is Seth was a good guy, then he was a bad guy, then he was a good guy, and he's a very complex character. Because he's not, he can be a good, he's a good protagonist, and then sometimes he's still the antagonist. He is the bad guy, and I really enjoy writing him because I feel like Seth, he feels like he's defined by one event in his life versus his entire life. But I've always been interested in Greek mythology as a young kid. I think it's some of the most interesting and bizarre stories to read. So that's why I ended up writing Greek mythology. And the Dark Elements, I was inspired by this cartoon. I don't know if you guys ever got it over here. It was called Gargoyles. And it was these crime-fighting gargoyles. And I was obsessed with it. And that's what inspired me to write the cartoon now on YouTube. So all you have to do is Google on YouTube Gargoyles cartoon and watch it. Then you'll see where I was inspired from. I don't know if I consider this a dark side or not, but when I went to college, I went to college for sociology and psychology with a criminal justice track. I wanted to work as a profiler with the FBI and their behavioral science unit. And what they do is they work with really the dark underbelly of life. They study mass murderers, spree killers, terrorists, serial killers, and that's what I was going to school for, was to study and work in that field. And so I took a lot of deviant psychology classes, abnormal psychology, and I finally got to put my college tuition to use in this book, having to pay off all those student loans. But it was Deadly Ever After actually deals with a serial killer. So I was able to pull from my previous education and experience and actually create a serial killer and also the psyche of having to deal with one coming after you.
Also in dem Buch geht es